The Food Safety Modernization Act, also known as FSMA, is transforming our food safety system by shifting the focus from responding to foodborne illness outbreaks to preventing them. Under FSMA, fresh produce is covered by the Produce Safety Rule. Depending on what type of produce a farm grows, where they are selling it to, and how much they are selling, they could be subject to the Produce Safety Rule. Farms that are subject to the Produce Safety Rule can be subject to routine regulatory inspections. In Oregon, FDA conducts farm inspections. ODA's work is funded by FDA, but it is non-regulatory. ODA's work consists of education, outreach, and technical assistance only. ODA's goal is to ensure that producers have the training and resources needed to understand and implement the rule. ODA has partnered with Oregon State University to offer education and outreach through our Produce Safety Alliance grower training classes and technical assistance via on-farm readiness reviews. On-farm readiness reviews, or OFRRs, are voluntary, free educational site visits typically conducted by ODA staff and OSU faculty. They are intended to help farm operators see where and how the Produce Safety Rule may apply to their operation. At the conclusion of each review, the team offers tips on how the farm can best comply with the rule. This series of videos provides a snapshot of what an on-farm readiness review looks like on a small, diversified operation, with an important exception: there is never an audience during an OFRR. The videos were shot at East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District's Headwaters Farm in Gresham, Oregon. Each video can stand alone or may be viewed separately based on your interests. When viewed together, the 5-part series provides a holistic view of the OFRR. The FSMA Produce Safety Rule lays out agricultural water standards and testing requirements for farms that are covered by the rule. However, while the rest of the rule is being enforced, the compliance date for agricultural water have been extended and are not in effect as of the filming of this video. The largest farms, those with sales of more than $500,000 in produce, do not have to begin testing agricultural water until January 2022. Small farms, those with $250,000 to $500,000 in produce sales, will begin the following year. Very small businesses making $25,000 to $250,000 will begin the year after, January 2024. Extension of the compliance timelines is responsive to the feedback that the produce industry provided regarding the complexity of the requirements and the practicality of implementing them. Water usage on produce farms varies widely depending on water availability, the kinds of produce grown, the growing region and season during which the water is applied, and how it is applied. The water quality can vary based on the source, especially for surface water that is impacted by weather events, regional land use, the volume of water in the system, and the delivery method. How the water is applied to the crop is a key consideration, and distribution systems may present additional safety hurdles. In this video, you'll learn about agricultural water quality requirements for surface, well, and municipal water, and risk-based strategies for managing agricultural water.
All agricultural water must be safe and of adequate sanitary quality for its intended use. Based on that, we're going to have some risk-based strategies based on source type and then on end use of that water. But the thing you need to pay attention to here is agricultural water, and that has a definition, okay? It's not all water. So we can kind of look at this little scheme over here to figure out what agricultural water actually is from a legal definition. So all the water used on the farm, right? That is your total water use. Then under that would be what water you use on covered produce or on food contact surfaces that would touch covered produce. Okay, so any water used for those things. And then it has to be direct application. So that water is going to directly touch the harvestable portion of the crop or a food contact surface that would touch the harvestable portion of the crop. That's what meets the definition of agricultural water. Another piece is that you have to inspect all of your agricultural water systems at the beginning of each growing season. That's going to include the source and the distribution system, and you're going to need to maintain those. How do we demonstrate that our agricultural water is of adequate sanitary quality? Okay, and it's going to be based on, one way to think about it is based on source type, and another way to think about it is based on use. So anyway, the construct here is we have a municipal water source is our lowest risk, and then groundwater would be the next lowest risk, and then surface water would be the highest risk. Based on that risk profile, we have how much testing would have to be done. Okay, so if you're using a municipal water source, you actually wouldn't have to test, but you would have to get documentation from the municipality that they're meeting their standard they're supposed to meet. For groundwater, there's going to be a minimal amount of testing, and then for surface water, there's going to be a high amount of testing. And then we're always going to test for, with respect to the rule, we're testing for generic E. coli. Okay, this is an indicator of fecal contamination. That's the construct. And so that's the actual number or presence absence that we're going to have to test for. There are specific methods that you have to follow or that your lab would have to follow. And FDA has a list of methods that are deemed approved as equivalent to the EPA method. Now, what are the requirements for quality based on use? Okay, so if you're using your water in a pre-harvest application, so anything going on in the field before harvest, that water doesn't have to meet potable standard, okay? It doesn't have to be drinkable in quality. It can have some contamination. So you can imagine we don't want to have to spend all these resources to make water super clean when it's out in the production field. So FDA has set standards for what those numbers have to be. And then when we're doing harvest activities or post-harvest activities, those are seen as higher risk because it's closer to going to market and closer to somebody consuming it. It does not have to meet potability on chemical standard, but it does on microbial, at least for E. coli. This number, 126, is a geometric mean, and that's meant to be an indicator of long-term quality. And then 410 is a thing called the statistical threshold value. Really, the only time you're ever going to run into this is if you're using surface water. Then the question is, what if you don't meet these requirements? Okay, so what if you're using surface water and it's too high, right? Or what if you get a positive on your well and you're using it for harvest or post-harvest water applications? So then what would you do? The first one is to go out, inspect your system, figure out what happened, right? So there's a dead deer in the creek, right? Okay, well, clearly I can clean that out. If that was the source, it'll fix it. My next test will be fine. I'll document it and move on with my life. That's the first option and the tidiest one. The next one is I could apply a time interval between the last day I irrigate and when I harvest. And that period of time will allow for some die-off of the generic E. coli in the field, okay? And FDA actually gifted us a certain amount of time. We can have up to 4 days, and that would accomplish a 2-log reduction. It would basically make most water in compliance if we went up to 4 days. Now, some crops can't handle that, okay? So some crops we need to apply water to the day we harvest, right, for quality issues. So that is very useful for a lot of products, but it won't work for some other ones. So FDA does allow that you can apply a time interval between harvest and the end of storage, or if you had some other mitigation step in there. So if you're going to use that as a strategy, you have to have scientific evidence that that procedure would actually accomplish the goal. And then the last option would be to just treat your water. So you could install a treatment system, right? After you figure out what your water source is, how you're using your water, what you have to test, and or what kind of corrective measure you might need. There are required records, okay? So one of the primary records that everyone would have to do would be inspect your agricultural water system at the beginning of the growing season and annually thereafter, okay? And that would need to be documented. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Go to the wellhead, look around, is everything intact? Do you have any damage? Looks great, write it down, sign and date. If and when you're doing testing, all the results of those tests for your ag water or a certificate of the testing from the municipality would also need to go in your records. Okay, so if you're using the city water, then you need a thing from the city saying that they're meeting the standard. And usually you can download that from their website. If you are treating the water, then you would need documentation of the water treatment itself and monitoring related to that, and scientific data that supports that water treatment's effective. If you're applying one of these strategies, so either the time interval between last irrigation and harvest, or a time interval between harvest and end of storage, you would need those records. And then if it's the time interval between harvest and storage, or some other washing step or something, then you would need the scientific data in your records too. All of this, right, which like most other parts of the rule, all of this is based on focusing on something that could contaminate your entire crop. So we've focused all our testing and risk strategy based on the source of the water, because that could contaminate the entire crop. So when we talk about post-harvest water use, there's a risk there, but we need to manage that water quality. So when it goes into, say, a tank where you're going to wash all your leafy greens, it needs to meet this standard when it goes in. And then you need to figure out how to maintain that so that it doesn't become a contamination source.
Interviewing the farmer and walking the farm allows reviewers to get a full picture of on-farm activities and practices. Reviewers follow standardized, open-ended, walking around questions as prompts to ensure that we address produce safety rule-specific issues and give the farmer the opportunity to tell the story of their operation. That way, the technical assistance we provide is targeted to the specific practices of their farm.
We're going to talk about post-harvest activities. So can you tell me some things that you do in this area?
Mainly we wash and pack produce.
Okay. What types of produce?
Everything from root crops to leafy greens, and all the things in between.
Okay, so do you know if some of those crops are covered crops and some are not covered by the rule?
I believe that they are the majority covered crops.
Okay, do you have any potatoes?
Yeah, we grow potatoes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so potatoes aren't covered by the rule.
Yeah.
So do you do anything special to like separate any equipment that you use for maybe covered crops or not covered crops, or are they all kind of handled pretty much the same?
Generally, we have a wash tank that we use for bunched greens and like head lettuce and cabbage and things like that. We have a wash tank that's just for salad mix and like loose cut greens. We use the spray tables for roots and things that have more dirt, and those are like on the other side from the wash tanks. And then we also have a root washer that we use for radishes, potatoes, like things that are without a top, that you can just run through the root washer.
Okay. So is the water used in the root washer, is that single pass or does it get recirculated?
It's single pass.
Okay, and then what about like the wash bins for the leafy greens and stuff?
That was reused, yeah. So we'll use that through the whole wash process, yeah.
Okay, and how do you decide how long to use it?
Well, we have a pool skimmer, so we'll pool skim it if it has like debris and stuff in it. We tend to wash cleanest to dirtiest, so we'll wash like bunched greens or things that don't have like any visible dirt on them first, and then things like lettuce or like bok choy that might hold a little more dirt on the plant last. So generally, we actually never change the water in the tanks during washing.
Okay. So it'd be like one day? You'd have one batch that you use all day?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe for a bigger farm, we might need more, but yeah.
Okay. And then is there any, do you ever check the turbidity of that? Or would there be any reason why you would ever decide to change it in the middle of the day?
I mean, I guess if it was like visually, I guess it would have to be a visual thing. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Like if it felt like it was not effectively cleaning the produce.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you use any chemical sanitizers or anything in your water?
No, not in the water.
Not in the water. One of the concerns we have sometimes is how are we handling some of our ready-to-eat product and using water, and could the water potentially be a source of contamination? So we talked a little bit about that earlier. So I brought some tomatoes, and I would like you to cut one of them in half for me.
Okay. I can do that. It's anyway.
Anyway.
Great.
Okay, so what happened here is these tomatoes were warmed up like they would be hot coming out of the field. And then to get the heat out of them, we basically submerged them in cold water and we added dye to that cold water. So as these start to cool down, it basically creates a vacuum that will suck the water into the fruit. Cantaloupe will do this. Sometimes apples could do this. I would assume some squash could do this.
I mean, I'm sure lettuce does it too, right? It's like
potentially. So some of these, it seems like the going theory is that the larger produce with a bigger difference in density on the inside might create more of a vacuum. But leafy greens have other parts like the stomata that are open and closed, and temperature can influence that. So possibly, yes, it would just be much harder for us to visualize. But anyway, this is just meant to point out that, you mentioned that water gets basically used all day. And so depending on what you're putting in there, is there some potential, infiltration is the worst case scenario, right? But, with leafy greens, there's a ton of surface area. So the ability for that bacteria to attach and maybe spread throughout as you switch from, crop to crop or whatever that might be throughout the day. If you're worried about that, one potential thing could be to change your water more frequently, or you could potentially use a sanitizer in your water treatment to help reduce cross-contamination. Again, if you did that, you would need to monitor that it's still effective and decide when you would change it.
On-farm readiness reviews take about 2 hours to complete, but are dictated by the farmer. At the close of the OFRR, reviewers summarize what they've seen. They offer up to 3 focus areas where the farm could be in closer alignment with the produce safety rule, share pertinent resources, and answer any questions the farmer may have. If reviewers have taken notes, these are left behind for the host farm's personal records. This video showed a demonstration OFRR in front of an audience. This is not typical. The farmer may invite anyone they would like. However, the OFRR team only shows up with 2 people. When the review team departs, they leave the farmer a spiral-bound OFRR manual, an ODA summary of the visit, any technical assistance resources that may be appropriate, and business cards from the reviewers. The Oregon Department of Agriculture and Oregon State University team members are available for follow-up technical assistance. If the farm is called for a routine produce safety rule inspection by FDA, the farm may request ODA or OSU to observe. This is helpful for the farm, as we may be able to provide more resources based on FDA discussion items, and it is helpful for ODA to better educate others on how the rule is being enforced.
So my name is Rowan Steele. I work for the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. We are a non-regulatory form of local government that operates in Multnomah County, east of the Willamette River. Essentially what we're doing here is we are creating a space to support the development of new farm businesses. We do that by making farm land, farm equipment, and farm infrastructure available at an affordable rate, and we also do trainings around business and good stewardship farming practices. Food safety is a critical component to any farm business. So the goal of all farmers is to create a product that is healthy and wholesome and is fresh and reaches their customer and they love it, it's delicious. But if farmers are making their customers sick, obviously there's a huge liability there. So food safety is especially critical in an incubator environment. We have 15 different farm businesses currently leasing land from us and growing their own enterprises. And so there's a lot of opportunities for cross-contamination, for miscommunications. And so our space needs to be dynamic and it needs to accommodate a lot of users. And it just makes it that much more important that not only are we setting up facilities and systems that are amenable to food safety, but that our farmers are well versed in the produce safety rule. So we decided to have an on-farm readiness review, not just because we wanted to make sure that our farmers understood the law, but also because we wanted to make sure that our facilities were optimal in terms of meeting food safety standards and for our systems to be working for the farmers. Currently, all of our farmers are exempt from the produce safety rule, but a lot of them have grown their businesses quite a bit over their time here at Headwaters Farm and are closely approaching where they would become a non-exempt operation. So as they grow their business, they know what the law is. They know that they need to be keeping logs. They know that they need to be following certain practices. They need to be in compliance regardless of whether they are exempt or not. So having gone through the Produce Safety Alliance training, it was really good to drive in some of the more important points around excluding wildlife, in terms of contaminated food or product in the field, in terms of bin washing, and some of the other kind of basic steps that all farms go through, but knowing what is in compliance and what's not. One of the things that I found most valuable is just the understanding of how important it is to have proper hand washing stations at every restroom and at every wash station. Anywhere that somebody's going to need a hand washing station, it's important to have one on site. For our farmers, what really resonated with them was understanding how they need to keep their resources like bins clean. Being able to go through that process and demystify what actually constitutes a proper cleaning program was super helpful. That includes tools, bins, and any food contact surfaces. So another reason that it was important for us to host a readiness review is a lot of farmers do have fear around bringing regulatory entities out to the farm. And so for us as a public entity, we can use this space as a training grounds, not just for our farmers, but other farmers in the area. So it was really important for us, for our farmers to understand that Oregon's Farm and Food Safety Team is here to provide services in a non-regulatory manner, that they can feel comfortable reaching out if they have questions about how to provide safe food.